presidential elections being held in the country as a sham. It is expected that the current president, Bashar al-Assad, will retain power, giving him another 7 years in office. Only government-controlled parts of Syria have been able to take part in the elections, leaving rebel-held regions unable to have a say. It's the first time in more than half a century that Syrians have been offered a choice of candidates. Bashar al-Assad is running against two relatively unknown challengers, both approved by a parliament dominated by Assad's supporters. Maha Hadja is an independent MP from Aleppo, a former Communist Party member who supports the government's military campaign against opposition forces. The other candidate, Hassan al-Nouri, who has served in the government before. He wants reconciliation and to rebuild Syria's infrastructure, but he also supports the fight against rebels. Let's go live to Rula Amin, who's at a refugee camp in the Bekaa Valley in neighbouring Lebanon, not far from the Syrian border. We've talked at length there about the people inside Syria who might have a say. We've seen the president casting his vote. What about those people there with you, some of whom have been in that camp for almost 3 years, I would guess? Do they feel like they're having any kind of say at all in the future of their country?
At all, David. This is one of the earliest camps that were established in Lebanon. Now there are over 1,200 camps like this. They're not regular camps. But you can see people here have been living in literally very miserable conditions, almost subhuman conditions. And on this day especially, they feel they had no say whatsoever. On one hand, many of them had crossed the border into Lebanon illegally because they were fleeing the war in a hurry, and that was the only way in. Because of that, they're not eligible to vote. On another hand, the Lebanese government had warned the Syrian refugees that if they do cross the border today into Syria, they will lose their status as displaced Syrian inside Lebanon, because that means they are safe and they are not in danger. And so many of them were afraid of this status and did not cross, even if they had wanted to. Others were concerned that if they don't show up at the polling station across the border from here, the government would take its punishment on them or their families. And some were afraid from the opposition and the rebel groups who threatened some of the, even the refugees here in Lebanon, that if they do vote, there will be ramifications. So apathy is growing very fast among these people, that after 3 years, they don't really have a say. They are being intimidated by both sides. And anyway, they don't feel that even if they went and voted, it would make any difference.
Would it be oversimplifying it, Rula, to say that the majority of the people where you are would like to see the back of President Assad, or are feelings there mixed? It's just that they're all in the same boat because they've lost their homes?
Well, it is mixed feelings, and these feelings are developing by the day. When we came here 2 years ago, the majority had some hope that within few months, maybe in a year, President Assad would have been thrown away from power or had stepped down. Today, if you speak to these people, they feel resigned that he is staying, that he has prevailed despite their revolution. And then you had more doubts here now. You can see and hear more doubts in the opposition leadership. They feel the opposition had been fragmented, divided. There's been a lot of infighting. There's been a lot of mistreatment even of the population under the rebel-controlled areas. So a lot of confusion here among the people. And now you can see that the urge of these people is to get their lives back. They want their security. They want to feed their children. They want to send them to school. Most of these kids, you see, have not been to a school in more than 2 years.
Rula, we'll leave it there for now. Back with you a little bit later on. That's Rula Amin in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. Let's talk now to Ammar Waqqaf, who's a member of an organisation called the Syrian Social Club. Can I ask you who you voted for?
Well, no one, because in Britain there is no Syrian embassy, and we're not allowed.
Who got your support?
Well, you and I, in the luxury of safe and democratic atmospheres, like here in Britain, we might be thinking about the quality of the elections, the fairness, the transparency, and so on and so forth. But I have to go with the Syrian, people inside Syria whose main concern.
Who got your support? I will try to work out. President Assad. Okay,
definitely.
so why do you think he's the right man to get another 7 years?
Well, again, the main determinant factor is that the Syrian people inside Syria, their top priorities aren't really the fairness of the elections and so on, but actually security, livelihood, and so on and so forth. So they need someone to get the government coherent as possible, because they believe a coherent government is their way forward.
But hundreds of thousands of people probably killed, maybe several million lost their homes, this is hardly a man to give your support to if you want a more secure country, surely.
How do we get out of the bottleneck? And that's the question on everyone's mind. Again, you and I could definitely think of how to make an elections process more fair, more representative, and so on and so forth. But it is the necessitating and imminent dangers that the people on the ground, millions of them...
But he's part of the problem, isn't he?
Is he? I mean,
because
Qatar, is it the UK?
Look at the situation in Syria now, over which he has presided as president.
Well, is there an alternative? Again, some Syrians would ask you, is there a better person to get this government act together?
Perhaps there would have been if they'd been allowed to include opposition members who weren't living outside the country.
I wouldn't be so sure about opposition members living outside and their charisma.
They're not allowed to take part in the presidential election.
I wouldn't be so sure about their leadership. I mean, we've seen in Lebanon last week that people were disenchanted with them very much, and a lot of those who live in the refugee camps in Lebanon went against their will.
You put the question up, I mean, who would be better? But unfortunately, the two people who are standing in the same election, I won't say against President Assad, are de facto supporters of what he's done, and the people who oppose what he's done aren't allowed to take part. So you ask the question, who could be better? Well, the fact is that there is no choice.
That's exactly why people are electing him, I think. Regarding those who chose to run or put forward their candidacy for the presidency, I actually respect them, because I tend to view, as a Syrian citizen, this thing on the longer term. We've opened this door. This is a very small step forward, in a sense, but it's a necessary one.
How's he going to, if he gets back in, and we know pretty well that he is going to get back in, President Bashar al-Assad, how's he going to bring this war to an end?
Well, he would need, well, not only the war to an end, there are even bigger issues. How is he going to secure, rebuilding the country? How is he going to...
You can't rebuild the country without bringing the war to an end. So how does he bring the war to an end?
I think the long-term strategy of the government at the moment is about securing local reconciliations and slowly but surely building trust with the disenchanted people around them. And that has been taking place for about a year now. It's a long process, but I think that's where the government is putting all their eggs, or that's the basket, where the government are putting their eggs, not the Geneva and the international community intervention, because that seems to be going nowhere, actually.
Appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed, Ammar Waqqaf.
Thank you, sir.
Good to have you in the studio.